Is that really that person?
Exactly. It's a different town. Isn't it?
That's right. I think.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome everyone here today. I think we're going to have a real enjoyable day today. So, I'd like confirmation of the agenda that the North Huron Museum Committee accept the agenda of December 19th, 2019 committee meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? Joan? Seconder? Dixie. Right on. Dixie? All in favor? Thank you. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. Public comment. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting that the North Huron Museum Committee hereby adopts the minutes of the meeting held November 21st, 2019 as presented. Okay, do I have a mover?
I so move.
Rob? Seconder? Dave? All in favor? Thank you. Delegations? None. Reports? Doug?
Okay. All right, so I got to follow up on the storage requirements for the museum. Basically, I sent a request for quote to Space Saver. You have this piece of paper that says confidential on it. The only reason it didn't get posted in minutes because the supplier stamped confidential on it, and we didn't want to put it out on the public to the public viewable. So this layout is just a starting point. We don't need to get hung up on exactly where the shelves are laid out. I'm actually not satisfied with the layout the guy's done, but it just gives us. I said, look, just give me a budget quote so we know where we're starting from. So I'll just kind of read my artifact storage report. Then further to visit the Lambton Heritage Museum by Verna Bill and myself, an email was sent to Space Saver requesting a budget quote for artifacts shelving for the 30 by 40 building to be added to the train station. I'm trying not to refer to it as a garage because it's a 35, it has to be a garage now, but it's a 30 by 40 building. And so Space Saver came back to me with a quote at just over $74,000. And that is, if you look at that layout, there's two rows on the outside that are the larger shelving for bigger furniture and bigger kind of artifacts. And then in the center, you see 4 rows of shelving, and that's the very tight, narrow shelving that's rollable that you can move back and forth. So you see 4 aisles stuck together there. Any of those aisles can be rolled apart, and you can walk between, creating a row, and you can access both sides of those shelves. Okay. On the back side of the sheet, it kind of gives you a bit of a look. So at the top there, you've got the larger shelving for the larger artifacts, furniture, and that kind of stuff. And then the lower half of the page, you see a sample of the smaller shelving. Now, all that shelving is adjustable. You can move it to any height. It just snaps into place. So again, so just a starting point. So he's done it up with 11-inch spacing between the shelves, which is too narrow for a number of artifacts. You pop shelves out, you adjust them and sort of thing. So, and he didn't put any, I didn't get him to quote anything like hangers for, clothing, right? There's I know in the Barton Dance Historical Society, they've got, a number of suits worn by celebrities and stuff like that. So that's all adjustable, but I'm figuring if we remove shelving from the quote, it'll actually reduce the price, and then we add some other special things that'll add the price up. So this is just to kind of give us a starting point. I was guessing because the Lambton Museum, their price on their shelving was about $168,000. So I was figuring we're a lot smaller than them, that we would be in around the $75,000 mark. So that works out pretty good. To give you, how do you visualize that? When I was looking at it, I thought, how do you visualize how much shelving this is? So I took the the shelving that's at the lower half of that page, the 11-inch spaced apart stuff, and I said, okay, how many lineal feet is that? And so it's 224 shelves that are, 248 shelves by 48-inch length comes to a total of 896 feet, which is like close to 900 feet of shelving if you just kind of laid it all out. And the reason I was out here measuring was to give you an idea that that shelving is 24 inches deep. So it's from the front of the table to here, and the way it was quoted with 11-inch height till the next shelf, okay? So if you visualized the old post office, I kind of walked across the face of the old post office and said, okay, from the stairwell to the end of the building is about 40 feet inside. It's about 40 feet inside on one floor. So you stand in the post office, you look across, about 40 feet is actually from that wall there to, not this wall, but the wall behind it, okay? So that kind of a length of shelving. And if you laid that out then, you would end up with 7 rows of shelving on each of the 3 floors running the full width of the building, okay? So a shelf that runs from here to the other side over there, to that wall over there, shelf that runs that full length, it's 24 inches deep, 7 of them per floor, okay? The whole length of the building is what kind of shelving you'd have for storing artifacts. And then you add to that the larger shelving, and so you'd have 1.5 length of the building, a shelf that's 48 inches deep, so that deep, by 40 inches high. So that'd be that high right there. Again, it's adjustable. If you had something big, you'd move around. And then again, 1.5, it's going to be the 48 inches deep, right? 48 inches deep down to here. And you can stack stuff on each side as well, if whatever the artifacts worked out to. And those are 25 inches high on top of that 25 inches high, right? So it's a lot of shelving. If you had that many shelves, just visualize it, like it's 7 shelves on each floor of the museum, running the entire length of the museum. I'm guessing that'd be more than adequate to store the artifacts that are in the existing artifacts in the museum. Now again, I say he's quoted 11-inch centers on the shelves, or 11-inch spaces. We'd be taking some shelves out. I mean, when it really comes down to it, you'd have to really sit down and look at all the artifacts and decide very specifically how, what stuff you'd need. What do you think, those of you that have been friends of the museum, as far as that quantity shelving for storing the artifacts, would that be enough to store all the artifacts?
I think it would. One question I do have is, do you know what the weight bearing would be on these? We have we have several West Cast stoves that weigh 200 pounds, that kind of thing. Is there a...
We get into those details again. From what I saw, that shelving they had there, it was pretty rugged stuff, like on the top half of the back page there. It's like industrial looking stuff.
Just one thing that came to my mind, that we'd have to be sure they're fairly, so they have those items.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dixie.
I just wonder, I can't tell from this drawing, but is there room then for a work countertop or a desk in here as well as?
There's nothing laid out for that at this point in time. Like I said, I wasn't satisfied with the layout that he's done. When I look at that quantity of shelving, I go, it sounds like there's way more shelving than we need.
Right.
So what that would mean then is we could probably cut off, take out, let's say 8 feet off of all the rows, move it down a bit, and then give ourselves room for the work area that you talk about, right? A bit of display area and stuff like that.
Organizing, putting away new items, or you're, exchanging.
Staging area kind of thing. Yeah.
Good. And maybe you'd even want a desk with a computer or a laptop as well, just to facilitate that work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, like I say, my hunch is, I mean, because unless you take every artifact back and start figuring it all out, my hunch is that the amount of shelving that's in the $74,000 quote is way more than you would need to store all the artifacts, current artifacts in the museum. And so then, if we ever got the green light from council at some point in time, then it's worth spending our time going, okay, let's take a real close look at what we've got, what we're gonna need to store, how we're gonna store it, and then actually reduce the quantity of shelving and increase the amount of storage space. That's my hunch when I kind of visualize how much shelving this includes.
Go
Doug,
ahead.
just underscore for me again, what actual space are you talking about with this? Is this your building that's going to be moved?
Yes, that's the 3540 garage that we stood in that would move and join to the station.
Okay. Can I ask, it's not directly related to this, but it did start to bother me when I got thinking about it. I thought you said that day that the building would be moved to the north side of the museum where there is the open double door, that kind of thing. Where, just tell me again, where you visualize the two buildings coming together.
You remember the 4 stakes in the grass,
Yes?
which was the 4 corners? So then the joining hallway that would join those two was the single door that was off of the main larger room in the train station. So that main large room in the train station, if we're standing,
Yes?
we're looking to the back of the train
Yes.
station, right? We walk in and that room kind of opens up. Back at that back corner of it, right? The hallway that goes to the bathrooms is right there. So let's say this is the hallway to the bathrooms. Before you get there, you turn, and there's the door. There's a single door on that room, and that becomes a hallway that joins in the train station. The door is removed, and you can just walk
One of
straight
the
across.
things that struck me that should be in the backs of our heads before, because it seems to me the moving of that building is going to be one of the first things that needs to be done, is the interpretation of the train station when you're all finished, and make sure that we are not moving the shed into an outside area that we would want to feature as an interpretation of the train station.
I'm not sure what to say.
No, it's probably only I understand what I'm saying, because I got thinking about that. But it seems to me that when you're completely finished this project, if it goes ahead, you would want to be making maximum use of the outside of your building as well. I mean, it's an all-season place. And you would want to make sure that you are not encroaching on the interpretation of the landing station as it would have been for the train station. Do you know what I'm saying? Maybe not.
Yeah.
Do you understand, Bill?
I understand.
Yeah.
Like
And so
it's-
I think, I have such trust in you and none in me in terms of visualizing. But I think we'd have to watch that we didn't encroach on some of that area for interpretation outside the building.
Like it is about the only place where we have space to move the building to get it close
Well,
enough.
I knew that was in
Other than
your
the front
head,
lawn. You wouldn't put
but
it
you
there.
see, my head doesn't care about that.
No, okay.
My head cares about
Yeah.
how it would be and how
Yeah.
you would frame it and how you would use it and so on. And so if you tell me it's the only place, I say thank you.
Yeah, it's really the only place. It is nicely hidden behind everything. Like you hardly even know that it's there from the front, from the street.
Yes?
Like it's quite nicely hidden, and we did make sure it matched it. We aren't cutting into the roof of the train station, that kind of stuff. That's why it's being joined with a hallway. so that you're really like a separate building with just adjoining hallway,
Okay.
so that you don't have to walk outside to get to it, and wheelchairs can go back and forth, that kind of thing, so.
Okay.
But the viewable sides of the train station, which we see from the south and from the street, are untouched, like it's the very same as it is, so.
Okay, thank you.
So the railway tracks were on the north side of the building?
They were, yeah.
So that's where people would leave, arrive and leave. And I really think you've got a major point there, but it may be unavoidable.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. The station master would have been, I imagine, in that, what we call the Alice Munro room.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And he could see the tracks down both ways. Our hallway coming across is gonna be to the east of that.
Did he have his communication tools there too,
Hmm?
at the window?
Oh, he would have,
At least that's the way the Blythe station used to be.
so, yeah, so we'll keep it away and join it in the hallway, so with as little as possible interruption, but yeah, the platforms would have been on that side of the station, right? The big overhangs are there, so we'll keep it away as much as we can.
Okay, any other questions for Doug? On that part?
So I am curious from those who have experience with all the artifacts in the museum, just, do you sense there's more than enough shelving there with what I described?
I think,
I think so.
so.
Because you're not gonna
Um,
keep everything anyway.
We have
right?
always had items that we know are not, when you first start a museum, and this is true of most museums, you collect almost anything because you haven't got anything.
Yep.
And so a lot of the things don't fit our mandate anymore.
Mhm.
And therefore, they will be culled in some form. So I think we probably do have enough.
Mhm.
Because not everything is in storage at one time, things are out being exhibited.
Mhm.
I'm not sure about the number of, did you include the barn dance
I mean,
artifacts in that?
all I did was try to give you a
Just-
visual snap
okay.
of what's there, and then you basically
Didn't
take
wanna
what you
forget
see
you.
in the museum and try to place it on those shelves. My hunch is there's tons of shelving for what we've got.
There's a reality here too that, we're not really taking into account the depth of those shelves. Like, because we're not expecting people to come in and study those artifacts,
Mhm.
like they can sit one behind the
Yeah.
other, and they can actually sit, I would suggest, many of them would be able to sit on top if you needed to, like,
That's a good point there, Lou, is that those shelves that are, the center shelves are 24 inches deep, but they're accessible from both sides.
Mhm.
So really, you can choose to push stuff through back or forth or however you want, but each one of these shelving units is rollable. Like, you can move it and create a aisleway between them, and then you can access from both sides. So, like the 24-inch 7 rows that I'm talking about is really a shelving unit that you can get from both sides and stack stuff from both sides, because 24 inches is too deep for a lot of artifacts, right? A lot of stuff's just, just your normal bookshelves, you only want them about 12 inches deep.
A lot of the artifact shelves we saw at Lambton were 3 and 4 deep of items. I just remember
Yeah.
the cheese dishes, right? I counted, there were 4
Yeah.
deep of cheese. Those,
Mhm.
we never use them now, but they're beautiful. But
Yep.
they had 4 rows of them. They were
The nice thing with this shelving too is we can start off with, like, instead of going with the 4 units, we can start with 3 or even 2.
And yes,
And then it's not, because once you got the tracks and everything in place, and they had that at Lambton too, they bought some more ones later on. So just from a fundraising point of view, it's hard to get the money later. So you want to make sure we have adequate shelving, but I really sense that there's way more shelving there that we're going to need when we get down to the discussion. But I'd rather have the budget at $75,000 and covered, and make a savings there when we come down to the actual, this is exactly what we need. And we've had reinforced to us time and again to make sure we take all kinds of time and plan this thing out to the 9th degree before we start moving, right? Because the rush to move, everybody regrets later on. They go, oh, we should have taken more time to tag and mark and take opportunity to make sure we just get what we want over and it's properly organized right off the bat. So, but this will give us an opportunity to absolutely, like you'll be able to number your shelves and your just like a grid and have it all.
We do have one other, I want to say storage. I know that's sort of, there, and I like the idea that you don't use the word storage. People don't understand what storage means, but the archives that we have, that kind of shelving really isn't for archives, is it? Or maps, like things, you know, that you have those special,
Mm-hmm.
But you can,
but I'm just, that might be
Yeah.
another
Mhm.
thing we'll have to look at somewhere.
They did have photos, if you look at the
Mhm,
brochure
they do,
on
yeah.
that PDF,
map
they,
They do, oh, do they?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
yeah,
I
you can,
hadn't
in some of those
realized that.
units, you can actually put in drawer units.
Yeah.
Oh, like this
Um,
rolling one here, I see what you mean.
So
So they
within
can
that,
put those in, if,
it's whatever, however you wanna outfit it.
because we bought a single unit, it was standalone, for large
Yeah. And they,
Documents and
posters,
maps,
documents,
yeah.
deeds, maps.
yeah, and they could be, and, you know, again, it's how we decide to arrange this room, like we may decide that, instead of that unit there, we're gonna have some of those rolling units, right? Like that's
Mhm.
kinda what you're pointing to, right? And they're on casters, so
Mm-hmm.
it's more just to kinda get ourselves comfortable with, is there enough space to store all the artifacts? And is what's the budget gonna be, you know, so. So hopefully we're all at that spot.
Any other questions for Doug? I think Lou's thinking there.
I'm thinking about things I don't know anything how to do.
Now's the
Was your group able to, I mean, I've read through what you did, it blows my head, and how much you did do on paper. But it seems to me that we don't even have the go-ahead yet. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, no, this is
Like,
all getting ready to present enough facts to
And
council to
from
make a
your point
decision.
of view, as you talked about it, where do you feel we would have to start? Like, it always seems to me, if I don't have the money, I find it hard to talk about what I'm gonna do with the money,
Mm-hmm,
if I don't have the money.
mm-hmm.
So when we present to council,
Well, I mean, that gets to the work plan, but we figure out how much it's all gonna cost. And
yes,
and then,
no, I understand that,
and we
Doug.
say,
Yeah.
we'll raise the money without taxpayers having to put any money in here. Then council hopefully makes a decision to say, yeah, if you guys can, this, you know, this is what it looks like and what it's gonna look like, and we think it's important, so we can say yes in favor of proceeding. Then the rubber hits the road, and that's fundraising stage. So we say, okay, we need to raise, you know, $250,000, something like that. And so now, that's when we kick into gear, and that could take a bunch of time, and then once.
And just kind of superficially, Doug, from your point of view, is money come first? Does moving the building come next? And then do we discuss the work plan for the actual,
My experience with the theater was the
Yes.
money comes first.
yes, that's what I'm
All the money
thinking.
comes first.
Yeah,
Unless there's a plan worked out to stage it,
Okay.
where it's like raise so much, and then you can do so much, and then raise some more, and then you can do some more.
okay, that's what I had to hear from you.
Yeah, so, and I don't know if I mentioned this meeting here before, or who I talked to about it. When we had raised about, for the theater, we'd raised about $75,000. And we came to council and said, hey, we got 75, we could put in the fire system and pass the fire code and open the theater, and then we'll keep raising money for the other system. And they said, no, you gotta raise it all. And I'm actually glad they did, because it keeps your feet to the fire, you gotta raise the money, you keep plugging away, and you keep building for that climax of actually doing the work. So, cause it's probably, it would have been harder to raise that last $60,000, if we had already had the theater open and all the hoo-ha was.
The hoopla
passed.
was
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
behind.
So, anyway, that's just thoughts.
Okay, any other questions over in this part? Go ahead, Joe.
Not a question, an observation. If we do have some money raised, it can help to leverage grant money, because you have to have cash or in kind. Nobody's gonna hand you 100% to do something.
Yep. Thank you. That's right. It made a big difference that we had raised, $30,000 in private funding pledges before we started getting, when we made grant applications. You're absolutely right, Joe.
Go ahead. Rob?
I think it's really important that even though we might be taking a piecemeal approach, like working at it as we can and plan various stages, I think we have to start out with a vision of the whole thing, the way it's what's possible, because that's what's going to sell it. I think it's not just one step along the way. This is what we're going to do, and we'll figure the rest out later. I think we need that vision at the very beginning. And I think this has given us a good basis for creating that.
Nothing else for Doug then? If something comes to mind, please just get my attention and we'll definitely ask, because I'm sure things are going to come up as we're going through this. Okay, committee work plan, 7.2. Doug did most of the typing on this, where we had a meeting, four of us had a meeting, and we just brought out some points, and we'd just like to bring them forward. So Doug, I'll let you
Okay.
do the.
So it was Joan and Paul and Vicky and myself that met in Vicky's office, and it was to try to do a work plan. We talked about all the different factors that potentially could be involved. I summarized it in this spreadsheet. I kind of followed the format of the house and dam work plan that they had. We did add a column for who, start date, finish date, and a checkbox column for completed on the far right there. And so this just lays out different parts of, I guess the overall thing is called the work plan. And then we have one section called the project plan. This is right out of our mandate from the terms of reference. Thanks, Carson. And so then with the project plan and the operation plan and the fundraising plan. So there's 3 bits of what we have to fill in the blanks on. And so, so then I summarized from our meeting this grid, and then emailed it out to the 4 of us that were on the committee, and then got feedback. And so then Vicki had some items to add to it, and I think Joan, you had mentioned a few things, and so then added those things in. I was trying to keep it down to 1 page, but it just it got away on this. And so I guess I'll just run through it. Would you like me just to run through the bits of it, and then we can?
Yes, and then maybe we have questions at the end. How was that?
Yeah. And our goal here today then, from the work plan not subcommittee, whatever, we're a little work group, is to fill in the start date or the potential finish dates of some of these things, right? And who's going to work on filling the blanks or head it up kind of thing. So project plan then, the objective, research and calculate all the costs to furnish and equip the train station to be the new location for the North Huron Museum. So the whole deal, like that's this shelving, that's other display shelving, that's lighting, that could be special treatment on the windows to stop UV rays, climate control, reception desk, you name it, like everything that we can possibly think of that we need in that building, added to that building, to have it ready for the artifacts to come into the building, right, and to be up and running as a museum. So under the activity then, determine requirements to move the 30 by 40 garage, permits, engineer, architect, all that kind of fun stuff. Cost to move and complete the 30 by 40 garage. Determine cost to finish the interior of the garage, cost of shelving for the artifacts, cost of furniture, displays, lighting, UV protection on windows, etc. Cost of LED sign at the road. Hey, while we're at it, let's put one of those signs out the road like the Huron County Museum has. So if we can raise funds for it, great. If not, it might get peeled off the overall project. And so then under discussion then is basically prepare detailed spreadsheets listing line by line all the items and related costs. We kind of went through this with the museum. I went through it big time with the church edition when we put the addition on the church. Like it was like every possible thing I could think of, and a total of $1.9 million in that one. So that's basically what we do. We just and we keep bringing that back to the committee, I'd say, and you'd say, oh, what about this, Doug, or what about that? And we just keep on putting the numbers in until we come up with a total cost of what it would cost to get it prepared to be the new North Huron Museum. Next on the project plan there, calculate the cost to move the artifacts. And so we've had talk about researching regulations regarding moving artifacts, estimate what amount of the existing artifacts can be stored in the new shelving units, identify in general terms the artifacts and contents to be moved, and if any artifacts need to be deaccessioned, determine who will be in charge and how long it will take to deaccession. Will the township archives be moved with the museum? If not, where will they go? So we have, in some of the preliminary talks, we've talked about putting the archives upstairs in the museum, like in the train station, right? There's that whole second floor. There's quite a bit of space up there, so that was one of the talks, but I mean, that'll be for committee to kind of discuss and decide. Then there's the Barn Dance Museum collection. Find out from the Barn Dance Historical Society what artifacts they own and what artifacts are on loan, and what their long-term vision and plan is for the Barn Dance Museum artifacts and displays. Are the artifacts in the Barn Dance collection catalog? That was a question that came up in follow-ups. And so then discussion, should the Barn Dance Museum displays and artifacts be donated to and become part of the North Huron Museum? Many of the artifacts are on loan, so the future of these artifacts is uncertain. Should the Barn Dance Museum be a permanent display or one of the rotating displays? There may not be enough room for it to be a permanent display, and it may make more sense to have it as a rotating display. So again, that's going to be, how is this going to fit together? But that's something that we really need to understand and figure out, right, Dave?
Yes.
So
I'll take it back to their meeting.
yeah, there'll be some back and forth on that, but it's an important deal. Yes.
Doug, is there, or David, is there any kind of one statement that can be made from your point of view at this time? Do you have interest from your group to be a part of this for sure, or are you still in discussion?
I'd say we're kind of in discussion, we're starting to wonder, should we disband the Barn Dance Museum or what our future holds? And we're going to have a real good look at what we're going to do in the future.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Right, so that's the three pieces that we have laid out for the project plan. They're big pieces. They're not little overnighters. And then there's the whole operation plan. So then the museum's ready, we moved the artifacts over, so now how's the museum gonna operate? And I think this really ties into what you were saying, Brock, was the vision of what's this gonna look like, and that's, I agree with you, that's gonna be the selling point, because when it comes to fundraising, it's about that vision of what this is gonna be and how it's gonna look, and why it's so important, right? So anyway, so some of the details in the operation plan: staff and hours, calculate staff hours that be related to the museum, coordinating volunteers, planning programs, etc., and the staff costs therefore attributable to the ongoing operation of the museum. Okay, so, because that's going to be taxpayer dollars going forward, is there a portion, how much staff time is going to be allocated to the museum? And in the notes or discussion, the intention is to relocate one staff person from North Huron Complex to the train station. What will be the days of the week and hours the museum will be consistently open? So that's kind of something we kind of want to have a sense of when we present to council. Opening the museum summer weekends. And so that's part of the operations, is how do you stay open on the weekends? And so we've got under activity, apply for student job grants, ask volunteers to help on summer weekends. This comes into play after the museum is open, but it's stated here to be clear that volunteers and students on job grants, not North Huron staff, will be the ones responsible for staffing the museum on the weekends, right? So, volunteer program and involvement and volunteer appreciation, review and update the volunteer manual with the list of responsibilities by volunteers, and talk to the Friends of the Museum. So, just volunteers are so important, right, to this, extremely important to the ongoing operation of the museum. And so we talked about, like, up front, making sure that it's we have a clear understanding and that we show appreciation to volunteers and, that whole area, that it runs well for the volunteers, right? And then we have engaging professionals to review and update existing policy and procedures, meet with professional pro bono to get input. And people we listed there were Elizabeth French, Jody Jerome, and John Rutledge. So it's like access some of these professionals for their advice on policies, procedures for the museum. Cost of building and grounds maintenance and utilities. Find out the cost from the current owner of the train station, being next to the works department. The incremental cost of lawn cutting and snow removal will be minimal. Compared to these costs for the existing museum, the old post office, we predict the costs will be considerably lower. So, but that's going to help the town with, okay, what's going to cost to run this and what are existing costs. Okay, hopefully it's a wash for the town. Museum Association membership fees. Find out from the French what museums North Huron Museum should be a member of and the related annual fees. Museum income through admission fees. So we talked about, there is also a plus side, an income side, people that come through paying admission. So find out from Elizabeth French what admission fees and museum membership fees should be, and estimate the annual income that could be generated through admission fees. So that's on the plus side of the profit and loss statement. Oversight of the museum after it's open. Review and update the museum policies regarding the former Board of Management. Determine how the museum should be run. Board of Management, Community Organization, Association, Township and Volunteers, Township alone. So, yeah, that's a pretty important piece of the deal, of how is the museum going to be overseen. The discussion was a one-page summary for the council and the committee to understand what body will oversee the museum, who they report to, what level of authority they will have, and the relationship with the North Huron staff and the council. So obviously we can't hand council here's your operating manual, have fun reading the 500-page book. They need to have a pretty nice, easy snapshot that says, okay, this is how it's gonna operate. Who's gonna be overseeing it? Museum promotions and programs plan. How will the museum be promoted? Will there be rotating displays? What might the first year programs and promotions look like? Determine what will be permanent displays. What are some ideas for rotational displays and draft schedule of displays for a year? Special events, concerts on the lawn. So there's lots of stuff to kick around, but that really does get closer to what's the museum going to look like? What's the vision of what's going to happen there? And then your basic operations budget, prepare a draft budget for operations, income and expenses. And finally, stage there, the fundraising plan. The objective is to raise all the funds to cover the cost of furnishing equipment and moving the artifacts. And so then we would be establishing a fundraising goal, research, identify potential funding grant programs to apply for, prepare grant applications, approach businesses, groups, and individuals, organizing fundraising events and activities. And then discussion pending council decision to proceed with moving the train station to the North Huron Museum to the train station, right? So, you're really not going to kick in with that fundraising plan until the go ahead. Now, if council says, how are you going to raise this money? Well, once we have a number of what we need to raise, Joan, you might have some ideas of some areas that we can approach, some places that we can approach for grants. But I mean, it's not a promissory list. It's, there's banks, financial institutions, Trillium Fund, Bruce Power, has some money. There's even potentially the Lucknow Kinsman with Music and Fields. They raise money every year. So there's various sources. We wouldn't pin that down, but really that doesn't kick in until council says, yep, let's move that museum. So.
Okay, so I guess we'll start and then just direct your questions. Go ahead.
Okay, Doug, with you and Joan both having been key persons working on this, how, at what point in time is this enough to present to council as an initial look at what you're trying to come to terms with? Because this is beautifully massive. And when can you stop and say, okay, if there are many aspects to this that council says absolutely no, then why would you go ahead? Where does this initial item come to their attention with some sort of guidance to say, please go ahead?
Excuse me now. Okay, Carson, he's sitting in for Vicky. He's our clerk, so I like him. He wanted to.
Okay,
discuss
Carson,
that.
I don't know, I may not be making that very clear.
No, and through you, Mr. Chair. So I understand exactly what you're saying. So the intention is the work plan itself. Once this committee has an idea of what this work plan is going to look like, it goes to council for adoption. Council adopts what the work plan is going to look like, and if they have concerns, if they think there's something missing, maybe this is something that needs to be considered too. That's the opportunity, and then basically, with council's approval of this work plan, the committee can start going forward on developing a proposal of how each of these things will look like. The one thing I would caution on here is, so this is particularly with the discussion column. So some of the stuff that's in the discussion column is stuff that this committee should be debating. Right. So, for example, staff and hours, it says the intention is to relocate one staff person. So that's not something this committee has decided yet. What the work plan should look like is, say, staff and hours. That'll appear as a committee agenda item, and then this committee discusses how any ideas of what they think staffing and hours should look like. Right. So there's a lot of stuff on here that's and through no fault of the people who developed it, but it's based on assumptions. But basically all these things are, the role of this committee is to discuss and debate these things in order to answer these questions. The other thing that I would note, worth mentioning, that might be in the operation plan that's early on, that this committee would need to consider is who owns the building, right? So is the intention to have the township take on the building? Is the intention to have the building owned by a share of volunteers? Because basically that decision you make first is what guides your decisions going forward. So basically whatever the proposal looks like of who owns the building, who that's going to be determine who's responsible for maintenance, where the fundraising plan itself right now, it's, yeah, we'll fundraise in order to facilitate the relocation, but how is it going to be fundraised going forward, right? Is the intention to rely on taxation? That might be a hard sell to council, right? Is the intention to have all these different groups on this committee contribute funds to it for the operation each year? Is the township going to contribute funds? All these questions are initial things that need to be discussed and debated by this committee in order to develop a fulsome proposal that council can consider. Basically, at the end of this term of this committee, council is expecting a proposal that'll outline this is how we would facilitate the relocation. this is how our day-to-day operations would look like. This would include what our governance structure is going to look like, who owns the building, how things are going to operate day to day, how it's going to be staffed, and then the fundraising plan is, well, how is this going to be fundraised, the relocation itself, and then how is it going to be fundraised going forward for its operations, right? So there's a few things to consider in the operation plan from a staff perspective. But basically, your work plan is basically when Mandy and Vicky prepared the agendas for these committee meetings, basically the way they would do it is to make sure that each thing on the work plan is being addressed. So, for example, staffing hours, it would be listed as an agenda item on the committee agenda, and then basically you would discuss, well, here's our ideas for how this could be staffed, and then basically a decision is made that would be incorporated in the final proposal. Once that is made, you move on to the next one. Then you discuss, make a decision, incorporate it in the final proposal, and move to the next one after that. So basically, every item on here is something that should be come forward to this committee, should discuss, and so basically, and as Brock alluded to, is it's important to establish that vision, and that vision is going to lay the groundwork for the items you have to address as a committee.
Now, Carson, if I understood you correctly, you suggested that the project plan goes first.
Yep, so which is basically...
And at what point in time will this committee get a feedback from council based on their first look at the project plan, if that's what we have to get under control first?
So my recommendation would be, so as Doug had mentioned, the work plan is a combination of these three plans. The work plan is your project plan, your operations plan, and your fundraising plan. Basically, when this committee is satisfied that all the actions that need to be considered by this committee are in the plan, it will come back to the committee for review and final adoption, and then that, once it's adopted by this committee, it will go to a council will approve the final plan, and then that will be this will be your guiding document going forward. So the agendas for the future committee meetings will work to address all the things that need to be addressed in each of the three plans. From a staff perspective, basically the place to start would be with the project plan. What's the project plan going to look like? How is the relocation from how is a relocation from the current museum to the train station? What would that look like? And then, so that's something for council to consider, right? And it would say, you would address all these things that are the activities, all those things need to be discussed by this committee and then addressed, right? So then your final proposal, it's going to be pretty lengthy because there will be a lot of work in it, and it'll speak to all these action items so that when council looks at it, they can say, okay, based on, for the project plan, we can see that these are the steps you're going to take, and then so they can follow the work that needs to be done, and then they'll move on to the operations plan and say, okay, well, everything in the project plan, if that relocation goes forward, how it's designed here, then how's it going to operate? And then, so those larger scale discussions that need to be addressed of who's going to pay for it, who's going to maintain it, all those things. Once how's it going to be governed? Once that's established, then you can kind of talk about the other pieces to it, which is like how's it going to be staffed, and then council will consider that as well. And then finally, the fundraising plan is, well, we know the costs of relocation, based on how we've designed it to operate. We can speculate on the costs of what it would take to operate annually. Here's how we intend to fundraise it. Here's how we intend to maintain its operations going forward, kind of thing. And then basically council will have those three plans, and the final report which will be the proposal from this committee, will develop the final picture of what this project is going to look like, and then council can consider it. And they might say, oh, this looks great. This considers everything we need to consider. you got the go ahead kind of thing, right? Or they might say, we're kind of concerned with this piece of your operation plan. Is there anything that can be done to address this concern kind of thing, right? So that's down the line based on once all this has been addressed, but then basically the final plan would be for council's consideration of all three of these aspects.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Going back to the notion of vision, I'm wondering, could we, in the very near future, put a vision into words to be able, and when we make our first presentation to council, and say, this is how we envision the end product. And it won't be photographs, but it'll be visions of what will happen to a person who is a guest of this place, and what they see and where they can go, and all of the features that we have articulated to a great degree. And can we do that, or is that too soon in the process?
That's through you, Mr. Chair. That's ultimately for this committee to decide. What is a requirement to go to council is ultimately this work plan, right? How this committee wants to present that work plan to council is ultimately up to this committee. The important thing is that council needs to get a sense of this is what's going to go into the committee's work for the next couple of years, right? So that the council knows what to expect and the approximate timelines, right? So that there's something holding this committee to those timelines, right?
It seems to me that Doug's presentation today has given me a much more physical notion of what is going to be there, of what could be there, and seems to me that as soon as we can sort of put that into words, if not in pictures, we're beginning a selling job on this very, very early on.
I think I saw it. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Go ahead, John.
So my burning question, right from the start, is about accreditation. And if this is to be an accredited museum or not, I mean, I think that is a decision that council needs to look at before we go down a rabbit hole, because if it's an accredited museum and we have to have a curator, and I think from what I'm reading from the museum standards, that seems to be the case, and council's saying they're not gonna fund anything, where's funding for that gonna come from? Or are we going to be some other kind of, not an accredited museum, but still have all the artifacts and the archives and things that a museum would have without being accredited? And if we're not accredited, it's gonna be harder to get funds. So that's my burning question.
Very
Go
good.
ahead, Doug.
I think that should be added to the project plan then, like that, the research, the accreditation, right? Like that's like a whole separate step, research, because, accreditation, because, yeah, that, we've gotten mixed signals on what is and isn't and whether it's required or not required and that sort of thing. And so requirements, question mark, right? And that would really be kind of along the lines of the accessing, engaging professionals to review and update existing policy and procedure, but
Yes.
maybe more so that would be engaging professionals, because we can read stuff till we're blue in the face and still, and some of the stuff's moving targets by the sound of things. So probably a discussion with Elizabeth French again, saying, okay, let's know for sure what do we need to have and how does this impact what, right?
Go ahead.
So through you, Chair. So those things that you guys are bringing up right now, these are the exact types of things you would incorporate in your action plan, right? So as Brock said, whether this committee should, one of your action items might be, one of the first things might be develop a vision of potential to present to council, right? So then you'd incorporate it in your action plan. Another one might be, as Joan has indicated, is make a determination on whether the museum would be an accredited museum or not, right? So all these things that this committee is discussing and realizing that you guys need to consider, these are the types of things you would want to incorporate in your action plan. So then when Mandy and Vicky prepare the agenda, they know that an agenda item for that committee meeting can be a discussion on potential accreditation of the museum or not, right? And then the committee can come prepared to discuss the benefits and cons to each side of each item, and then ultimately a determination can be made that can be incorporated in the final proposal to go to council.
Yes. Dixie Lee, please.
To Carson, so I just need a little bit of clarification. So I think what you're saying is that for the work plan to be presented to, that will be presented to council, we don't need the details in the discussion column as it appears here, but there's probably more that should be added in the first two columns to flesh it out and make sure we've. Is that what you're saying? And then all the details get fleshed out later, once the project or the work plan is approved. Is that what you're saying? We don't need all those details to overwhelm them right now? It's just
exactly, and
more.
And those are the things that won't
Okay.
have been
That helps.
actually decided by this committee
Right.
yet, right? So basically, the importance of the work plan and all these three plans that comprise the work plan is to list the specific action items that
Okay.
need to be discussed by this committee, and that's what gets approved by council,
Okay.
right? So it'll
That
list,
helps,
we need to
yeah.
consider, we need to do this action, this action, this action, in order to address these questions. And then when you have those discussions at the committee level, that's where what's in the discussion column now that's where the things will have been decided, right? So you'll consider the action item, and then it'll be discussed at a meeting based on the timelines that this committee establishes, and then a decision will be made on it, and then that'll be incorporated in your final proposal that gets presented to council.
Okay, that helps.
Oh, sorry, no, go ahead.
I want to say something more to what Brock has said. I think that we are trying to sell two things here. The reality and the feasibility of moving from across the street up the street, building to building. But it seems to me there's a dimension here that if we are a committee that is doing what we should be doing, we need to do that, but I think we need to sell the idea that we as people on this committee believe in the importance of having a museum in this community. Because if council doesn't go for that, it's been the same as across the road. You know, I mean, and I didn't blame anybody, but that's a hard sell in any town, in any museum I've ever been associated with. You've got to look a long way ahead as to why this is an important project. And if we can't sell that, as well as the actual physical needs of making it happen, I don't think we can totally convince everybody, but we need to speak it from our heart and our soul. And I think that's what Brock is suggesting. A statement to say, this is a very important vision for North Huron to have.
So, go ahead, Brock.
I fully agree with that. I mean, I was on council for 9 years, and there was virtually no interest in the museum on that council, apart from a few words that I dropped once in a while. And it was discouraging to the committee because sometimes they would come up with a great idea for promoting something, and they would be attacked for being responsible for all the costs of doing that. So we had to have bake sales and all sorts of devices to raise a few dollars to do something to promote the museum. And unless we have that kind of buy-in from council on an ongoing basis, this is going to be a very, very difficult process.
Go ahead, Doug.
Couple things here. The one question I have for Carson is, the way you laid that out, it almost sounded like we were gonna go sequentially, step by step through this whole work plan as a committee.
Yep.
Now, that's a bit of a brute though, Carson, because we will be here till the cows come home, all right? Like, one of us can be, or some of us can be starting to research and calculate the cost of furnished equipment at this train station. The Barn Dance Museum collection, the discussion and research on that can be going on at the same time. Like, I don't have to be involved with that, but certainly Dave Wall has to be involved with that, and some that are more familiar with the collection. So, you know, I mean, it's not like do this step, finish it completely, now start the next step. Because it's just gonna take forever. We've got to be able to like have, and some people can start working on the operating plan for the museum. And bring it to this meeting in a, like I've done with some of this stuff here, is like, here's the package, and they're the expert on it, they explain it, and the rest of us go, yeah, we shoot some questions and we move on, but we.
So through your chair, so the importance is establishing the timelines though. There's nothing stopping this committee from saying, we wanna have two things going on at once, right? It's just you have to put start dates for the action items and finish dates to those, right? And then some of the decisions this committee makes will guide other decisions, right? So to stick with that example, so this committee has to decide who would be owning the building. Would it be owned by the township? When you make that decision, that guides what options you have available for your next type groups of decisions, right? Which is, so for example, on here was the maintenance of the facility, right? So if the township owns it, right, then you know that the township is going to be the one maintaining it, right? So basically, what you need to do is organize your project plan, your operation plan, fundraising plan in a way that makes sense, so that the key decisions you make lead you to where the committee's at a state where they can make decisions on the next decisions that need to be made.
Okay, go ahead, Doug.
Carson spoke to the other issue I was going to bring up was, my understanding all along is that the facility would be donated to the town, and the town was going to also make a commitment that it would remain a museum for at least 20 years, right? The idea that it's not going to the town, it's going to be done by something else operated, is totally out of left field for me. And in fact, to me, that's going to put too much burden on, like, museums don't make money. And so the plan, as I understood it, is that coming up with an operation plan that's a minimal overhead, right? You've got a facility that's going to cost less to heat than the existing one, and you're not adding staff, you're just simply moving one staff person over. You're doing as much as you can with volunteers, but your basics like heat, hydro, snow, and cutting grass and building maintenance would be something that the town will be making a clear decision on, but making a decision that would become part of the town's operating budget.
Through you, Chair. So ultimately, the council established a committee to say what might a proposal to move the current museum to the old train station, what might that look like? Other than that, it's from the grassroots, ground up, right? So that's why, like as you mentioned, that like none of that has been decided. That's ultimately why this committee was established, so that these things could be discussed, right? So that way, things like whether it's better that the municipality owns it, or whether it's better that a group owns it, kind of thing. All those things, those are all discussions that need to be made by the committee in order to develop the best proposal to be presented to council.
Go ahead, Doug.
I mean, that'll just kill it. Like, if this thing has to be a separate standalone thing with its own insurance policies, with its own operating budget and its own fundraising to cover the operating budget, we may as well go home.
Which
right?
is through your chair. So that's that's a discussion this committee needs to have, right? If that's something that the committee feels, that's discussed by the committee, it's decided, and then that discussion gets incorporated in the proposal. The important thing is that all these decisions made to lead to this, the final proposal, are discussed by the committee, right?
Yeah.
So when certain things are established, so say, to use the example that one staff person's gonna be there, when things are automatically assumed like that, it takes the opportunity of committee members to share ideas that might be better or might not have been considered before, and that's the purpose of this committee, is almost a giant brainstorming where all these things can be discussed in order to develop a proposal that will ultimately look better than and sustainable in the long term for the operations of the museum.
Joan, had her hand up.
So my understanding, and I don't think I'm from another planet, is that we have an angel benefactor, the Kuyvenhovens, who have said to the town, we will gift you this parcel for a 20-year commitment. When we worked through this work plan, we were told that what some of the expectations are, that there will be a staff person move. It wasn't something that we were said, oh, it's up in the air. There are expectations in here that we've been told right from the very start. And to me, it's a slap in the face to say to someone who is a very generous benefactor that here we go, everything has to be discussed right from, is a committee of citizens going to run this? That wasn't the deal as I understood. How about anybody else?
I would agree.
Yeah, I agree, although I think we're kind of getting into the governance. I mean, the ownership and the governance are two different things, right?
Yes.
So, if I go back to the example of Strathroy Caradoc, it's owned by the municipality, but it's basically governed by a board which reports to the council regularly.
Which is two different things.
Yeah,
But that's not
yeah.
the physical building.
Yeah,
So when you have a benefactor saying, I will gift this to the municipality, the governance is separate.
yeah, oh yeah.
The expectation that a bunch of 70 and 80-year-olds are going to own and run, I'm just speechless.
Yeah.
Not really, but
Yeah, so,
Can I
so
just
if,
say, like,
if the committee,
Yeah.
the committee wants, if like as Doug has suggested, if the committee wants their proposal to say that, Doug would be gifting the building to the township, if that's the proposal this committee would want to take forward, then that just needs to be established somewhere so that it can be reflected in the plan, right? All these things, the point of this is just to make sure that all these things are decided and they're written down so that they're reflected in the plan, so that there's no assumptions of anything going forward. So when that final plan comes to council, it says the building would be gifted, and because if it's not in the plan, the first question is going to be who owns the building, right? So that's why purposes, you start from ground zero, even if there's, and I'm already sensing that there's a consensus in the room of what to do with that, but even the point is to go through that and make sure it gets reflected in the final plan.
Brock?
I don't think that's a matter for this committee to work on. This is a deal between the Kuyvenhovens and the council. And that's an offer that council has to either accept or reject and live up to. It's not the responsibility of this group. We're charged with looking into what could be done with that facility as a museum and develop it and make it, but the parameters of the ownership and management of that resource is beyond our scope, I think.
Go ahead, Doug.
We can document it, like you said, there's consensus building around the room here, and I'm fine with that. We just discuss it and agree upon it.
And that's just the point of the work plan, and the point of this committee is to go through these discussions and to make sure everything is covered. Ultimately, to answer Brock's question, it was my understanding that this council was aware of the offer, and before they accepted any offer, they wanted to see what this might look like, which is why this committee was established, in order to receive a proposal of what it might look like for entering into any sort of agreement.
Okay, so we're looking into what is possible to develop, and if it is a pleasing arrangement, then the council will be able to make a decision on accepting the gift or
Yep.
otherwise.
Understandably, council is not gonna accept the gift until they know what it's gonna, like, they don't need the
Right.
Trojan horse coming in and surprise. So,
Right.
so that's what I saw our mandate as, is, okay, before we can accept this gift, we have to know how's it gonna run, what's it gonna look like, what's it gonna cost. And so we're coming through with that, but we can do the preliminary plan, just clarifying that ownership is with, and it's correct, the gift was offered to the Township of North Huron. Blake and I had discussions about that, and with Bernie as well, and some stuff was even documented as to how that would look, so,
Yep, and so the reason council wanted it from ground zero is they didn't want any potential to be left off the table, right? If there's a good idea, council didn't want to bind anything from this committee's consideration, right?
Okay.
Ultimately, council wants to receive the best possible proposal they can receive, which is why this committee can basically debate and discuss all the elements to do with a museum being run out of the old train station.
I mean, there has to be a lot of trust back and forth. I mean, obviously, all this work's happening. There's no signed agreement between Kivenoven and North Huron. So, you know, at the last moment, somebody could say, nah, not doing it. But I assure you that won't happen, okay? But there is, you know, we don't have a signed document making that, because it's all kind of in flux. It's all in the air, right? So,
Okay, go ahead, Dixie.
So I was just gonna say, it sounds to me like it's so easy to kind of get off into one of the areas where we want to, you know, do a lot of work and research, but sounds to me like we need to really focus ourselves on fleshing out the first column, the first two columns of this work plan, to get it to council, to then say, okay, thank you, go ahead, and then. So we maybe, I don't know, it's just so easy to get sidetracked into details, right? So I'm just hoping that we can get this work plan fine-tuned as quickly as possible, because we don't have a decade to work this out.
Right.
That's just kind of a comment that, you know, I'm thinking.
Through you, you're entirely right. In the development of what's important is what decisions need to be made, not decisions themselves at this point. The action
Right.
items need to say,
Mhm,
well,
mhm,
what do
yeah.
we need to decide on? And then as the meetings progress is when you start deciding on those things.
Anything else? Because I know Carson has to go in a little bit, so if any questions come up, please don't hesitate, get my attention, and we'll pass them to Carson. Go ahead, Brock.
I have another question. It strikes me that, and I may be missing the points here, but it seems to me that we need to be promoting the museum concept as an economic development process in the community and how that works. When my wife and I started our repository, our goal was to promote our community. And that's why we didn't charge any admission for research unless it was very extensive. And we had visitors come and stay 3 or 4 days in Blythe studying our collection. So, and that was part of our purpose in doing it. I think the same thing needs to be looked at here from a very commercial point of view, in terms of the fact that we are not only going to incur a lot of costs, but there's a community benefit that that should be promoted and explained. So I'm just wondering if that's something that we should be including more expressly in our work plan.
Okay, thank you.
Where would that,
Go ahead.
under what section would that?
So just to, it's up to the committee of where they want to put that and the timelines, but ultimately, so if this committee felt economic development was important for it, you might see an action item on there that is research the potential of economic development as it relates to museums. Then when Mandy and Vicky prepare the agendas, you'd see an agenda item there, and that meeting might involve a large-scale discussion of economic development potential related to the museums, and then any decisions of what to incorporate in a proposal might get made, right? So as Brock had mentioned, outlining the importance to council of economic development that museums can bring, right? So then you can make some decisions on that, and then it can ultimately incorporate in your proposal. Basically, the decisions you make along the line to each action item, basically, by the end of it, your proposal is pretty much going to be written because all the decisions will have been made, right? So that proposal is going to speak to what it's going to look like, and every decision you make along the way basically fills in a little more of what it's finally going to look like.
I'd like to add one other point. Our repository board has considered one point in terms of promotion. The idea that we've discussed is creation of a joint brochure by all of the historical groups in the county, maybe in surrounding counties as well, whereby our visitors would be handed a brochure promoting the museum in Wingham and the archives in this place or that place. So that would be a way of promoting each other. And I think that's a viable kind of approach to take. And so we're not at the stage now where we can put a brochure together on our museum here, but it's something that, a promotion idea that I think you have a captive audience, people who are interested in old things and past, and so we promote them and let them know what else is available in this area.
Similar, that makes me think of the Gardens of Huron in Perth, and you get a map and you have it, and all that stuff. Yeah,
Yes.
great
So
idea.
to kind of take that example, so in your operations plan, you might see an action item that says something along the lines of research and develop promotional materials, right? Then at a meeting down the line, you'll see on the committee agenda, and it'll say promotional materials, and then basically a giant discussion could be held of what those could potentially look like, who would be developing them, how they'd be developed, all that kind of thing.
So I think I had you first.
I have a suggestion, and I don't know if it's something that's still available or not. Before I retired, when we did work plans and that, we would have a facilitator come in from Omafra who could help the committee because they have the expertise on the work plans, help us to go through the process because they've got the expert knowledge, and without having any bias at all, can help us work through it and expedite it. I don't know if they still offer that, but I've had really good experience with them before, or if that's something that we're allowed to do or not.
Doug, go ahead.
A couple concerns I'm having is that we keep adding items to our work plan, and it's just gonna get unwieldy and just out of hand on us when we keep adding more and more steps to it. And, vision's good and that, but this is gonna boil down to dollars and cents, right? And if we haven't got a plan that works on paper with dollars and cents, council's not gonna approve it. Because we could have a huge vision about doing, Facebook marketing and, all kinds of, and advertising and putting up billboards. If it's gonna cost $100,000 a year, it's gonna be a non-starter. So we do need to get the nuts and bolts of this thing down, of what's the, and it's about a minimum overhead museum, like a minimum cost for the town to bear, to make it, palatable. Like we do need to get the dollars and cents side of it nailed down pretty good. I mean, the capital costs, we can fundraise for that, but the ongoing operation cost, volunteers will lose passion over time, and different grants run out and come and go. So it's gonna depend on the town saying, yeah, we'll own and maintain this building and we'll have one staff person in there. I'm sorry, I'm talking a little bit, like injecting ideas here, but it gotta come from somewhere. And a palatable cost item that the town can bear, and like, yes, we'll volunteer and do almost everything possible, and this is how great this is going to look, because it's going to be this, and it's going to be a visitor center. It's going to attract and be an amazing asset to North Huron when it's up and running, and it's going to be worth having that asset for the minimal cost that it is to keep the doors open.
Yes, I guess I see things written down. We have to pass that to the council. This is what it's going to be, and it's got to go. Sorry, go ahead. Somebody.
This may not be fair, and I don't want to be asking it in any other spirit, but I think Doug and Joan worked as a committee to produce this. And I asked then Carson, how soon could the project plan, which you said should be first, how soon could that go to council for an overview? Or do Doug and Joan feel that that's already been passed by the core people that are going to be making those decisions anyway? How worthy was your time and energy representing us to have that meeting to produce this for us today? I'm saying, I think you got a glimpse of either your total frustrations or your total productivity as a small representative group from this group. Like, we've really been meeting since August. And I'm getting to feel kind of, we're kind of spinning our wheels, and I'm asking if Doug and Joan have something worthy from their work and their small meeting with representatives of council, and say, well, yes, we'll take this back and look at it again, or say it's time to move it on, and let them tell us what they don't like. I don't know where this is at, but I'm with Doug. I think, I think we have to see a way of going ahead.
So through you, Chair, ultimately there's two things that have to go to council. One, a finished work plan that contains all the action items that this committee is going to consider, and two, the final proposal, which council will either consider or not, and then make a decision on that. So before, I'm not sure if you mean before any of the actual relocation work can be carried out. Is that what you mean?
I just mean, I think, I would think that we need some feedback now from the people who are eventually going to say yes or no to this, and say you're on the right track. I think that's what you've been trying to do today, Carson. You say no, Doug?
No, Joan and I are both nodding our head, because no, our responsibility is to come up with a work plan. We can't go like, hey, council, have a look at this sort of thing. We as a committee have to have a work plan. That's our job.
How do we know when we're finished?
You never finish.
Well,
So basically,
No, but that's what I mean. Like Doug is saying, we've got to do it. But how do we know when we've gone far enough to say, well, look, it's not worth our time and energy to go on and on if they're going to turn around and tell us what they think should have been on this and we didn't put it on?
I like Carson too.
so ultimately, council wants to just see what this committee is going to be using their time to do, kind of thing, what things they're going to be considering. So basically, the action items in the work plan need to be contained in the work plan. It'll go to council, council will look at it and say, yes, this looks fine, or you all, or they might look at it and some of the questions they might have say, oh, you actually need to include a discussion on this because this needs to be considered too, kind of thing. And then basically, once you have that, it's gone to council, council approves it, then you can start going through the action items on your work plan, right? And then ultimately, when you go through those action items on your work plan, it's going to lead to decisions being made on what this museum is going to look like, and then ultimately, what your final proposal is going to look like that goes to council.
Okay, Joan was first here.
So maybe we missed one word on this. Maybe it should have said draft. Because my understanding was that you and Vicki and I were meeting to bring a draft forward for this committee to start the discussion, not that we were putting it down in cement and saying, okay, here guys, this is what we're doing. I thought that we were tasked with coming up with a draft, and I really appreciate your input.
Yes.
It's helpful.
And so basically, this is the draft form. At this point in the meeting is when you guys are supposed to be discussing and saying, is there any action items missing? Is there anything else that we need to consider that needs to be included? Once you've had that discussion, you can have a sense of whether this is beyond the draft stage or not. If it is, and Mandy's taking notes here of different action items that have been mentioned, ultimately that'll come back in a more full form. And then if the committee's satisfied with the action items that are in there, they can approve the work plan, and then it'll go to council for adoption.
I have a question for you directly. Would you prefer that this said action instead of activity?
It's up
I
to-
mean, same,
yeah, it means the same thing.
okay.
It's up to the committee for clarity, whatever works best for the committee, as long as they understand what each thing means. Right, I just have to step out now, but Dwayne is here as a staff person too, who can answer questions.
Go ahead, Doug. Thanks very much, Carson.
Just FYI, that's the house and dam work plan right there. House and dam work plan, it's one page,
So,
and it says number, item, activity, discussion, target date complete.
I know.
Okay.
The one difference with that one, of why that one's smaller, is the term of that committee is a year. The term of this committee is till the end of the term of council, which is about 3 years.
Mhm.
So
So,
that's any indicator of the length, maybe.
so I'm just I our committee that we don't keep on adding and making the same
That's what
3
I'm
pages
saying.
long.
I really
Like
think.
there's lots of stuff we can
Yeah.
talk about, but, council's gonna need a dollars and cents number at the end of the day, and so, cause I don't disagree with vision, but we could talk for 3 meetings on vision and, have, like in some ways, the physical, what this building ends up looking like and what it has in it is what people are gonna walk into. Like I did put down a vision for the museum, brainstorm and write out a vision statement for what the museum will be and look like and what the visitors to the museum will experience and the importance of having the North Huron Museum. Like kind of there's a,
Okay, I think what I'll do now, I'll take these 3 questions, and then we had a gentleman sitting in the back listening, and I'd just like to, if he has anything to offer after we go. We'll go to Joan first and
Okay,
then
I just want to say again, I think it might be a good idea for us to get a facilitator to help us through this, if we're allowed to do that. If a buffer still does it, it's no cost, and they could move us through this a lot easier than we're really struggling.
Okay, go ahead, Bill.
A work plan is just a totally new activity for me, you know, never been in one, so it takes a while to wrap your head around all bits and pieces. My question is there an expectation from council as to when they would like to hear from us as a committee? Is that in the mandate of, like,
Go ahead, John.
You know though, right, because Bernie was here at the other meeting, and he was like, get the work plan done, and we got a 3-year term, we need to get this, the sooner the better on getting the work plan to them, the sooner the better works thing, because otherwise, if we take too long, we will be facing a lame duck council.
Yeah.
That's, you bet,
just-
you bet.
And so we do have
Sure.
to move along, we can't take forever to do this, we need to, and I'm a little worried, Joan, about bringing in a facilitator, that's gonna delay the whole process.
Actually, it expedites it. It
We have to
really
get 'em,
does,
and
from
then
my
we-
experience. Yeah.
I thought we were pretty close here.
Dixie, go
Well,
ahead.
a couple of points. I think Carson raised some items that we should include, and I don't really see it as lengthening the list. I think we can fine tune the action activity items. My other point is, yes, the dollars and cents are important, but if you don't have accreditation, if you don't have a good vision, then the money's not, you're not going to be able to access grants and other funds and inspire and encourage private donors and companies to support us. So we need to be careful, I think, that we do still have that balance in there, and I think we have it in there, but I just think we can fine tune some of these things, add some of the missing pieces, and have another draft for the next meeting and just say, okay, one last time, what are we missing? All right, we're done, here, it can go. I don't know, maybe I'm way off base there.
Okay. Okay, at this time, just ask our CEO if you'd like to mention, sort of put me on the spot, but just, you're listening to different things.
Get this going.
Yeah, so I haven't been actively following all of your meetings as we've been going along, but just in terms of so I like what I'm hearing from my perspective in terms of the discussions that you're having. I think you're definitely on the right page and you're going in the right direction. And I think that what you put together here, Doug and Joan and Vicky,
Paul.
yeah, I think this is a really good, really great work, and I think you're definitely on the right, definitely going in the direction. And I think in terms of this is the type and sort of information that council will be looking for to move that forward. And then just in terms of going back to Brock's point, so council is currently working on a strategic plan, and there's a draft and it's available on the website. It will be coming back to council in January if everything goes as planned. But this council has, one of the items on there is about tourism and economic development. Economic development, I would suggest, is coming very strong from this council. So I would suggest, just in terms of that, I mean, I'm not speaking for council, but I think economic development is certainly a high priority for this council. So in terms of tying this to that mandate, I think would be very beneficial. And I think you're doing that just in terms of the draft strategic plan does talk about tourism, and that's part of this proposal. And just in terms of bringing people to the community and bringing people back to the community, which I think as well is what this is built on. Just in terms of, and again, I wasn't here when Bernie was here, but really in terms of council really they've completed their first term of office. They have 3 more terms, but the work, if you want to call it that, is going to be in the next 2 years. Okay, decisions will happen the next 2 years. When council gets into the last term of office, they tend to be completing projects that they've been working on, and basically preparing to go into campaign mode again. Generally speaking, in terms of that tends to be the cycle of the council. So they're in that last. So really, the next 2 years are I'll call them the critical years for this council. So in terms of your timeline that you're working on, keep that in mind, I guess, the next 2 years. That basically, and in terms of coming to council, I think when you're ready as a committee, certainly come to council when you feel that you're ready and you have something you want to put in front of them for their consideration or something that you want direction on. And they'll give you feedback to the proposal that you're putting on the table. They've have brought you folks together, in terms of they want the input from the community on this. So that's why you folks are here. They want to hear from you. They want to hear the thoughts. And they also recognize, in terms of with the museum, that there's multiple stakeholders with respect to museums. So, just around the table here, there's various organizations that you're representing. So, it's a community. Community project. This touches many different parts of the community, whether it's the WMDA, whether it's the Barn Dance, Alice Monroe, etc. I mean, there's multiple individuals, and it's creating something that everybody can get behind and everybody's going to support. In terms of the ownership of the building, yes, I mean that's certainly been discussed. That in terms of with the previous council, that was certainly the indication and the direction. This council is aware of that. They haven't actually made that decision, but they certainly know that that's the intention. But going back to Carson's point, in terms of, I think that's important though to put in here, to simply indicate that the township would own and maintain the building. I think it's really just a documentation standpoint. And in terms of the staffing, we do have staff at the rec center, and in terms of relocating a staff member to this, that's certainly not out of the question. Again, but I think it's just important to document that on there. So, but in terms of the facilitator, it's by all, if the committee, if you decide that you want to bring in a facilitator, that's certainly something we can do. We have actually a list of individuals that we can reach out to. I don't know if OMAFRA specifically does that, but there is some retired OMAFRA folk that are still helping us out. So we can certainly do that if that's the wishes of the committee. But so it's within your, if you wish to bring a facilitator, that's certainly an option. It would be at the discretion of the committee whether or not you wish to do that. But I think that I think this is really great work what you've done here.
I appreciate hearing that. So are there any more questions directed to Dwayne at this time?
A comment. Thank you for that, Dwayne. I feel very much more encouraged than I was 20 minutes ago.
Well, thanks.
No.
Go ahead.
No, not in particular to Dwayne. And I'm probably asking stupid questions because I'm late. But really and truly, I thought it was well done. Other than I think there are some things that are actual questions in here that do we have the answers for? Do we get the answers for? Like we're concerned about the barn dance.
Yeah, that was being discussed, and Dave's been asked to look into that. So.
And the one above it, about the artifacts and the deconcession of things. I guess my thought is, why is that not going on right now? It doesn't matter whether the museum moves or it doesn't move, it still has to be emptied out of things that are not needed. Why is that not a job that can be done by
Who's going
someone
to do?
But if you
over
wanna use-
the winter, because then you might know how much storage space you actually need. I know there's lots of things in there that should be gone.
Not yet.
Okay, Joan, go ahead.
So, my off the head response to you is it costs money and we haven't got a commitment to spend any money.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, so I would propose that we just add some of these items to this work plan and get on with it. Just an FYI, it's costing me $1,000 a month on insurance, property taxes, etc. So every month that we're holding out, like every year we're holding out, it's $12,000 again. Like, you know, I'm doing my best, but I also would like to see this move along quickly to a
Yes.
decision point with council. Because once council makes a decision, if they say no, then obviously I put a for sale sign in front of the place and get on with it. But while it's holding, it is costing this guy a little bit of, and his wife a bit to hold on to this property. And so I would propose that we add some of these items that we've talked about, that Amanda's documented, and we still have to establish the dates, the column of the target dates for this. I don't know whether we have time to do that yet, Mr. Chair, or whether we.
I think we can go ahead and maybe do some of that, and if everyone's all right with that, we can do that. Okay, go
I
ahead,
just
Brenda.
want to say, I totally agree. I think the sooner that we get this agreed upon, the sooner we go to council.
Okay.
And I think that's, I guess my thought was in saying, why is there not somebody over the winter going to do something with all the,
We just want to hold till
Stuff.
everything goes, because I think we can move this on.
because otherwise we'll be 5 years
No,
waiting for everything to be okay.
That's really outside of what our committee's about, Myrna. Like, dealing with that stuff is not
Okay,
what this group is.
Okay.
okay. Okay, so, any other questions for our CEO before we carry on with the next?
I'll be here if anything comes up.
Oh, super, thanks. Okay, so Doug, you want to move some dates in?
Okay, so really from the understanding of what Carson spoke about then, the text that I have in the discussion column should kind of disappear, because some of that text is directing us what we should think or do, whereas it needs to be the committee's decision to do those things. So we blank out the discussion column in effect, or certainly anything that looks like it's directing it, and we go down, so we say research and calculate the cost. And Amanda, I've added some items, because I got the spreadsheet here, so, but I can send it to you, we can work that out. Okay, so I'll just start recording in my copy here then. So, rather than talking about start dates and finish dates, we'll just talk about objective finish dates then, right, to keep it simple? Otherwise, we're like, well, we should start then and we should end then. Does that sound reasonable? Like the dam committee just has target dates, no start dates for the columns, right? So, and the who, we'll leave that out too. So we'll just talk about what are our target dates for each of these categories. So I'm gonna hide those columns, hide select the columns, okay, here we go. So research and calculate all the costs to furnish and equip the train station to be the new location for the North Huron Museum. That's a biggie. What's the potential target date? 3 months?
It's in your,
Yeah, I feel we're giving that to you in a sense, because you're,
Okay, so March 2020?
Whether it says who or not, we know who.
Yeah.
yeah.
The committee will decide who, right?
Okay, March 20th then?
Because there's no who on the dam one either. That's really for us to decide as a committee.
March 2020.
All right. Research accreditation requirements for museums. That's actually fairly important. That's almost in front of that one, but we can run simultaneous. somebody's gonna need to research accreditation, so, and that needs to be done fairly quickly, so that would be done by February?
Do do we have anything that Elizabeth already gave us, I wonder?
But somebody's really gotta like, let's work on the target dates, like, so,
So could we direct staff to contact Elizabeth French Gibson and see when she can provide us with that detail, or?
I'm just
Could
suggesting
we-
though that we don't start talking about the how too
No,
much,
but I
or we will
mean-
be here
but-
too long.
If she's not available,
But is 2
it-
months
it-
enough to find out? That's what I'm just,
oh yeah, okay, I get
2
you.
months is
Yeah,
enough,
yeah.
right?
Probably.
Like,
February.
we will nail down how, but if we do that on each item, we're gonna be here till
No,
6
I just-
o'clock.
So
I was thinking
February,
of Elizabeth.
So Feb 2020 is so, because doing it
Yeah.
1 month is gonna be too quick. So
Yeah.
2 months to get that nailed down, and 3 months to try to get all the costs together. Calculate the
Agreed.
cost to move the artifacts. Woo-hoo. We don't. That's gonna be a nebulous number. It's gonna be like this number that I had for the
Yeah,
shelving. It's
yeah.
gonna be like, well, it's gonna be about this much. But there is like, what are the regulations and stuff like that, so that can be combined with the discussion with whoever. So do we talk March 2020 for that too, then 3 months to try to figure out what that would be? Does that sound reasonable?
Okay, March 20th?
That's
20? March 20?
The Barn Dance Museum collection, find out from the Barn Dance Historic Society what they own, and are they cataloged, and what's their vision for the future. Dave, what do you think? How much time do you need to kind of work that out with the Barn Dance to let the committee know the future of the Barn Dance? Or
I think they probably take maybe 3 months to do that too.
so March 2020. Okay. All right, the vision for the museum. Brainstorm, write a vision statement for what the museum will be and look like, and what the visitors to the museum will experience, and the importance of the museum. Do you think, Brock, you were speaking to that point, how long do you think it'd take to?
I wouldn't put, did you have on the end of there importance of the museum?
Importance of having the North Huron Museum. I mean, I could take that off, but,
Or do we want to make it a separate item in terms of the
Can-
economic benefits
very good.
to the
Right,
community
next
of
line-
having a museum?
the next line that I had inserted was from our discussion was economic development. Identify positive economic impact of the museum. So
Yeah, just
that-
put economic benefit, to
Yeah.
having a museum,
So I've
yeah.
stroked that out then,
Rather than importance,
Dixie,
because sure,
is so then I
How's
put in,
that?
brainstorm and write out a vision statement for what the museum will be and look like, and what visitors to the museum will experience,
That
at the
could be done
museum.
fairly quickly, I would think.
That could be done in a month, like next, so that could be the January, that could be for our January 20 meeting.
I think so.
Okay, January 2020. Identify positive economic impact of the museum, kind of the same thing then? Jan 2020? These are just targets.
Maybe.
Sure.
We'll try. How's that?
We'll try.
We'll try. You don't
Legal
make it.
ownership of the museum, clarify what body will own and maintain the museum. I think that'll be a fast one from the committee.
Yeah.
We,
mhm.
Staff and hours, calculate staff hours relating to museum, coordinating volunteers, you know, what they're doing, so the staff and the hours. Let that go to February.
That kind of ties in with the accreditation too, because if we have to have a curator, that affects staffing.
Right, and that is for Feb 2020, so you wanna let that slip an extra month then, first rotation, then we'll know, and then decide on staffing hours?
Sure.
Opening the museum hours, it kind of falls in the same thing, right, 2020, March then for that. Volunteer program and involvement and volunteer appreciation. Review and update volunteer manual list with a list of responsibilities by volunteers. What do you think?
We should be able to do that in a couple of months. We've already got it, all we gotta do is review it.
So Feb 2020?
It has to be updated,
Huh?
Okay.
has to be updated.
There are pieces missing because it was done 10 years ago.
We did one after that.
I'll talk to you.
Hmm.
Is Feb 20, is 2 months enough time to do that?
I
Okay.
think.
Engaging professionals to review and update existing policies and procedures. Meet with professionals pro bono to get input. How much time do we need for that?
Better leave 3 months.
All March 2020, okay. Cost of building and grounds maintenance and utilities. Find out these costs. That can be done pretty quickly. Feb 2020, but it may as well, yeah, okay, Feb 2020, I'll put down. Museum Association membership fees. Find out from Elizabeth French what associations the Northern Museum should be a member of and related fees. The research accreditation was gonna be February 20th, so could we have that done by Feb 20th as well?
Well, I think Elizabeth could probably do both of those, answer those questions pretty
Same time,
quickly and
yeah.
simply.
Okay. Museum income through admission fees, again, that's gonna be with Elizabeth too, right?
We had a bunch of questions for her.
Feb 2020, there's a bunch that we can rattle off with Elizabeth. Oversight of the museum after it's reopened. Review and update the museum policies regarding the former board of management. Determine how the museum would be run going forward,
So
so
that could take some research.
that could take some time, eh?
That
But I
could
think
be-
that could be actually relatively simple if you wanna start with what other museums have and pull
Just
it off
what
their
the- make
websites
a
and
list
say,
of-
this will work, yeah, how do they govern their,
Well, and we have a
We have our
governing,
own set.
so like,
Yeah.
unless there's
So
anything really
we can
badly wrong
certainly
with what you've got.
compare and, yeah.
So, yeah, cause this was just review and update
Mhm.
our Northern Museum policies.
Yeah,
How much time do you think we
Well-
need for that?
that should be done by
Policies
February
is
too.
different from governance though.
Mr.
Right.
Chair?
There are many different ways, yeah.
Go, sorry, go ahead,
just
Joan.
have a question. We're putting an awful lot of things to be done in 2 or 3 months. Is this the
Mhm.
entire committee that is expected to do this in 2 or 3 months? In 4 hours worth of meetings? Or like,
Somebody has to.
somebody
we-
has to
each one.
take ownership of doing
Absolutely.
those things, right?
Yeah, we're gonna have to task.
Yeah, can't we
Because-
do like we did with looking at storage and different individuals say,
Right.
okay, I'll look into this and bring information to the committee.
And bring it
Right.
before the
Yeah,
whole
Because-
bring
committee.
it, yeah, bring it
Like
back,
a
yeah.
couple people head off to Goddard to meet with Elizabeth French at the Huron Museum and hit all the items that have to do with
When
Elizabeth.
do we decide this, though?
Right now.
Well, we're just about done through, we're just about
No,
got
but I'm
this
saying we
idea.
have to give the jobs out to
Delegate.
people,
We need to
if they're
delegate
gonna
this stuff.
get
You
it
are
done in 2 months.
Absolutely right, Lou.
Mhm.
Museum promotions and programs plan, how will the museum be promoted, will there be rotating displays, what might the first year program look like, and stuff like that, so that's gonna be more of a lengthy, thought-through process, right? So, should we give ourselves an extra month on that one?
Okay.
Good
Yeah.
part.
April 2020. Operations budget, prepare the draft budget for the operations, again, April 2020. So we should be ready to roll by the end of April. 4 months.
That was a
My God.
quick 2 years.
Well, this is
All right, we're trying to get it done
This
in
is
less than 2
optimistic,
years.
okay? Like, we set targets and we might end up being behind them a little bit, but we want to. Yeah, it's something to work towards. So then maybe we do need the who column back, Mr. Chair.
Okay, now, going back to Mr. Who, we'll start it again.
So, the research and calculate the cost to furnish the equipment, obviously, I don't mind heading that up, but with help from others, right? So, but we'll just put down, well, no, we can put down multiple people here. So, I'll volunteer to do the, research and calculate cost to furnish the station. Are there others that could, assist in that?
Yes, I'll help you out.
Oh, okay. Anybody else?
Now, which one is it you're doing?
That's the very first one.
Very, very first.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Don't spread yourself out too thin, because there's gonna be
A lot
those operation
for-
ones coming down. Maybe just the two of us for
Yeah,
starters
yeah.
here, and we'll pull from other people as needed. Research accreditation requirements for museums. This is the stuff that's got to do, there's a bunch of here that have to do with Elizabeth French,
mhm.
right? So how about, who feels comfortable with heading up, or being involved with the accreditation requirements and researching into that? And then there's gonna be,
Yeah, we will.
okay, there we go. So we got Joan
And Bill,
and Bill. Okay,
you will send this out soon, 'cause
yeah, this is gonna be like quick to
Sure, get
Amanda and
everything
then
down
boom
right,
up the
because-
committee. Calculate the cost to move the artifacts, okay? That is really gonna be a ballpark, folks, like, um,
do we involve Jody in that?
I
Like,
think,
should we be adding our
She-
pro bono people in with the Who's?
well, we'll have the person head up, but if we can empower them to be allowed to go and access a Jody and a Elizabeth French, like if I was running that one, I'd be trying to talk to both those people and say, hey, well, for sure Jody, because she knows the artifacts pretty much inside and out. It should be somebody that's familiar with the museum artifacts as well.
And I ran into John Rutledge at a party. We talked, and he said he's willing to do anything pro bono, just let him know. So
Yep.
I don't know how you go about doing that. Like, is it protocol for me to help me with something, or do I have to?
Can we empower people to access as they need advice?
Yeah, so it's getting his input, right?
Yeah.
It's getting his input,
Yep.
right? I don't see a problem in terms of going and talking to him, and if he's willing to do
And
it
if he-
and help us, then.
I mean, as I understand it, it's just as long as decisions aren't being made.
Right.
Three decisions aren't
Right.
being made.
It's gathering
And
information.
Gather information, bring it to the
Yeah.
committee, for the
Yeah.
Or if
committee
he
to
said,
decide.
Yeah.
he might have an idea on something, can he talk about it? We just make sure he gets on the agenda ahead of time.
Mhm.
Okay, we're still,
So we're back to cost of
Lots of
moving the
things.
artifacts. Who is familiar with the museum contents and could look at some of this stuff and take a stab at what it would be?
I know, Bill, you knew a lot of the stuff that was in there.
well, so does Verna.
How about Bill and Verna?
You wanna do it?
What are we doing now? We're gonna,
Cost of moving artifacts. Now,
What's that? Are you on that?
yeah,
Yeah,
moving
right.
artifacts,
No, here.
yeah.
Yeah, that whole step.
we'll meet for
I
coffee,
thought
but
Joan
after
and Bill
Christmas.
and Jody were doing
No,
it.
there's another step that
No.
got stuck in between there.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
didn't know that.
So Bill and Verna, you wanna look at that one?
Okay.
So we're gonna calculate the cost of the moving the artifacts,
Budget.
Bill and
Ballpark Idea.
okay.
Verna, why not?
With Jody's.
Like my shelving report, it's not gonna be the final,
Right.
you know,
No.
we're not gonna hang you on it.
Right.
It's just gonna be, hey, we think it's gonna be this much effort to do it. Barn Dance Museum Collection? All eyes on Dave.
Move the board and see what they want to do.
Vision for the museum. Who's on for that?
What's this one?
Vision for the museum.
I would volunteer.
Ah, good, Brock.
Thanks, Brock.
Yeah.
Good.
And anybody else gonna help Brock with that, work with that?
I will, Brock, I'll help you.
Lou.
Or may
No,
I
no,
know
no.
where we are?
Don't worry,
Well, it's
this
not
guy's
on
gonna
there.
set it out right.
I'll send this out
Soon.
Okay.
Cause I'm getting a
Vision
little
wasn't on
muddy.
there.
Oh, it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
on there,
'cause there's-
okay.
the items got added that we talked about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Economic development, identify positive impact of the museum. The committee
How
could do
about-
that one really, but,
It could
yeah.
be, you could,
It's
if you
part of
could
that too
start
then,
it,
right?
we've all got ideas, like I'm thinking we gotta hook in with the trail.
Okay, where is that?
I mean, the trail's right
It's
beside
not
us.
in
That's
there
one
yet,
that's
Rob.
It's a new
Oh,
one.
it's on
That was one that got added about talking with the economic development.
Right.
It's the identify the positive impact of the museum, economic.
Yeah, that's
positive
good,
impact.
I'm comfortable.
Okay, so we'll tie that
And
together then,
just
so.
relating to
Brock
that,
and
Doug, I remember a few years ago after the Nobel Prize was awarded to Alice Munro, and there were grants, and there were several reports written, and I know one of them was involving the economic impact of having an Alice Munro museum, and it will be in this building somewhere, I'm sure.
I have
There were
that
several
report.
We'll have
reports
it.
that were
If we could dig
written
that up again.
regarding
just-
that,
Okay,
because
There
I've
is
read
a,
it.
there
it
is,
might help save
I'm gonna put-
a
I'm
lot
gonna
of
tag
running
you on that one
around
too,
if you've
Verna.
got something.
Okay, Joan had a question here.
That is the labor market research project, where that was done.
Right,
And,
there were three aspects though, there wasn't, it was labor market and
oh,
like,
no, but
Different-
the funding was a
Yes.
labor market
It's this
research
one.
project.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yes, that one. And it
Okay,
was funded
Yay.
through
Yeah.
community,
so Verna, I just put your initials on
Yeah.
that group too
colleges
now,
and
okay?
universities.
You got voluntold.
that was the one that was.
Legal ownership of the
Did several
museum,
of
I don't
them
think we have to
know?
delegate that, I think we're just gonna say that, so I'm just gonna put committee
Just that
now.
document.
Committee, okay?
I just finished reading that report again.
Staff and hours, calculate hours that will be related to the museum. So that's gonna have to do with deciding when's the museum gonna be open, how many hours is it gonna be? And so when does the staff person need to be there? I wouldn't want to talk about the details of that, but who would want to talk about, what, the kind of hours the museum's gonna be
Yeah, I
open?
talked to Vicky
Yeah.
with that,
Yeah.
that'd be all right.
Oh, you wanna be on there?
Yeah, and talk to Vicky, like,
So Vicky and Paul?
yeah, Vicky and Paul.
Okay, so Vicky and Paul Hefford, all right. Opening the museum on the weekends, kind of the same thing then, can we put that with you again?
Yes.
And volunteer program and involvement and volunteer appreciation. All right.
I
Joan?
actually have a lot of professional experience in volunteer programming, so with someone from the Friends of the Museum, I would be happy
Dixie?
to.
I'll do, sure, I'll
All right.
work with you, John.
Isn't that one of the mandates with the new economic
It
plan, or
is.
the new vision for the town?
The strategic plan.
Yeah, it's
Volunteer appreciation,
Yeah.
so I definitely want whatever they have to say.
I thought the strategic plan also had
Yeah.
even visitor
Yeah.
information
It
set.
does.
It
Sure.
does.
In the draft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the draft. It has to come back to council. for
Well, I've got the
consideration.
opening for the museum. I've got the Nobel Prize. Actually, I do have the Nobel Prize from Alice.
Oh,
Yeah.
You're kidding?
Yeah, we got, yeah.
Yeah.
We need
I've
to
got
do
her
that.
desk and her chair and her,
Holy Ned.
and I've got a whole mass of her awards.
I'm gonna keep moving down this thing here.
Okay, sorry, go
Uh,
ahead.
Engaging
Listen, that's from
professionals,
people from all over the world.
Could be, yep.
engaging
Okay.
professionals to review and update existing policies and procedures. Do we just do that as needed kind of thing?
Let's,
Like,
that could be quite slow. You don't have to go through each one, read,
Yeah.
see what we're missing, because I was
Yeah.
reading the new one and we are missing things that have
Yeah.
changed, just museums have changed.
So we know who they are, Elizabeth French, Jody Jerome, and John Rutledge. And so I just put in the who, it just as needed. So
Okay.
whoever needs to tap into
That
whichever
could be
one
the
of
very
these.
end, like, that's gonna take a lot of,
Like, it depends on where we want
Yeah.
to grab your expertise, right?
Right.
So I don't think there's gonna be, that's not really a specific step that, well, now we're gonna do this step.
yeah, no.
In
it'll
fact,
be
it's
on-
almost not part of the objectives down the far side. Because if it's a step that we're supposed to have agenda item, and like the way Carson was talking about it, okay,
Right.
now we're gonna complete the step called engaging professionals to review and update existing policy procedures. That's a wide bucket, so maybe, should we just
Do it as
take
needed.
that out?
Take it out and
Yeah,
put them in
Yeah.
as a who.
because we already have it in different spots.
Mhm.
So maybe we'll just
Right.
delete that as an item, as a line, because it's just gonna be a nebulous thing that we can't actually specifically complete. Cost of building grounds, maintenance and utilities,
I think that's Doug.
Doug can do that, no problem. And Paul's with me, so we're together on that one, Paul.
Yep.
Museum Association membership fees, it's a simple one, Elizabeth French, who's meeting with Elizabeth somewhere online? Bill?
Where?
Bill and
Just make- Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you, just
Next to you.
we'll add
and
that
I.
to the list.
Yeah.
okay, yeah, so, yeah, and where's that? Right. Okay. Then I have museum income through admission fees, find out from Elizabeth, so same deal then,
Same
right?
thing.
Bill and Joan. Oversight of museum after it's reopened, okay, this is a biggie. Review and update the museum policies regarding the foreign board of management, determine how the museum would be run.
I think once we have a list of the, as Dixie said, we have a list of the options that different,
Yeah, well, I don't mind looking, I mean, I've already got it for Strathroy Caradoc, and I can look online for the other small museums, and even Stratford Perth, and
Awesome.
see what they have, and then
Mhm.
maybe, yeah,
maybe we can get one that fits us.
yeah,
Oh,
rather
yeah.
than reinventing the wheel, I mean.
Okay, do you need anybody with you on that?
I can help you there once we get that
Okay.
message from, yeah.
Okay, sure.
Okay,
Because
there we
I've got
go.
a finger in a few museums
Okay.
that I could talk to.
Museum
easily.
promotions and programs plan, how the museum be promoted, will there be rotating displays, what it might look like the first year, programs and so on and so forth. So that's like a little more of, what's this museum gonna run like? Now, go ahead.
You all, maybe that's,
I would take out the after determine what would be permanent displays.
Yeah.
I don't
yeah,
think we
I
need
don't
that
think we can
last
do that
sentence
now,
in there,
that's
Right.
so.
after you've decided what's permanent,
Mhm.
what's
Mm-hmm.
temporary. So that's down the road.
Yeah,
Mhm.
So then it just has a different finish date, that's all.
Okay,
Mm,
yeah,
well, yeah,
I'd work
could
on
do,
that,
yeah.
but it won't be right now.
No, like is that is that important step of the work plan? Like, does council need to get an answer to this?
Well, promotion can tie into
Costs.
fundraising, you know,
Mhm.
if you promote it well, money will come in.
Although, like, I think of some of the conversations I had with one like Trevor, he
Well, what
is
if we said-
interested in this.
Doug, can we say summer
Site.
of 20?
Hmm.
Well, we
Yeah,
have to,
push
we
it
have to
back.
present to the,
Well, I mean,
council.
just for that one.
but the last date
Is
is the
that,
last
is it
date,
like
and
more specific? I don't know.
I think it can be just, how will the museum do it? Like, just the fact, I think it just needs to be a statement that says, this is how we plan to do it. We plan to have, in this area, rotating displays, and we plan to have
Yeah,
this
well,
here, and this is all not cast in stone,
It's
but
just so far in the future, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So then you put a future date on it.
And I think
Wayne
Eliz-
has something?
well, I was just gonna say Elizabeth, I know had some ideas.
Okay.
You know, for example, from October to November, a military
And
Right.
sort of thing. So
The Friends of
maybe when you're
Museum
talking to Elizabeth,
have done wonderful things, all kinds of, so it wouldn't be hard, it's just, we don't even know what
We're getting into details there that we don't
featuring.
need for this. So what if you put what's the latest date you already have, April?
April 20th.
Okay, we'll put that for this one, how's
Mhm.
that? And
Yeah.
then we can
Okay.
have just something to fit in here that
Exactly. It
will
doesn't need
give
to be
us, point us
super
in a
detailed, but it
direction,
has to
yeah.
give the council an idea of
Okay.
what the
I
museum's
think
gonna look like.
Doug's idea, just
Mm.
make a statement in some
Yeah.
Okay,
cases.
okay.
Let them
Exactly.
ask questions if they've got
We're
questions.
not looking
Mhm.
for like a
Detail.
day-by-day, week-by-week plan. It's just, this is kind of what we see how.
Maybe, could I make a suggestion that 4 of us are friends of the museum, but we could meet over, we could do that together, that could be quite easy.
Down the road,
Down
talk
the
about
road,
the
neighborhood.
promotion, yeah.
Doing what?
How to promote
Oh, okay.
the museum at the train station,
Mhm.
like specifically the train station.
Okay.
Forget everything we had at the town hall, right?
Yep.
But, and hey, my place, April Coffee, will do it.
April coffee.
Yeah.
So the,
I'm not
But
gonna worry about the
that's
date yet.
details, Bill, we
I know,
don't need
I know.
details.
But even the statement, I just,
yeah.
Well, a statement,
So
yeah.
I got Bill and Joan down for that?
Bill and
No.
team.
Nope, Bill and who else is
Dixie Lee
down for
and-
that?
I
The
guess
Friends
we're
of
all
the
4 of
Museum.
us.
Okay, so that's gonna be,
Brock, do you want to
Brock,
be involved
would
and
you?
have an
Berta
input in that?
Staffler
or-
and
I don't
who's the
think
other
I-
Friends of the
Okay.
Museum here?
Okay,
Dixie, are you on this then?
Berna,
is
Bill.
Yeah,
so, do you
I'll-
want all names, or?
jump in with that, sure.
Oh, you're doing, okay.
Yeah.
I
So
got,
motion.
yeah, I'm putting your all initials down here,
Okay.
so.
Sure.
I got 3 is down right now. Who am I missing then? I got Bill and Verna and Dixie Lee.
Lou,
Lou.
Duke and Lou. Oh, Lou, you're in here too. Okay. All right. And then operations budget. Prepared draft budget for operations, income and expenses. I'm a spreadsheet guy. I don't mind doing that kind of stuff, but
Oh, good.
we need some input.
I can help you.
Okay, great.
Is April,
I'm just wondering, in that, could we maybe have Vicky maybe too?
Yes.
Just, I think
Excellent.
that-
No, you're absolutely right.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely right. Right on. Okay, and then the fundraising plan. I just put down North Huron committee members. Like
Right,
you
Yes.
can't really nail down a fundraising plan. Like, it's like, this is the amount of money we've got to raise. And in general terms, we're going to go after grants and individuals and businesses, and we're
Yeah.
going to try to get this accomplished in 12 months. I don't know how much more to
Yeah.
say than that.
No, I think you've got it nailed in the, under the activity column, all of the
Yeah.
statements, I think.
Yeah.
Hit everything.
Okay, so
After we know the operations budget, I guess then we have a pretty good idea how much money we're looking for.
the other parts of it we'll bring into it. Like,
Yeah.
we'll
Mhm.
bring part of the operation. Like, the operating budget is not the capital cost budget
No,
to make the
no,
museum ready.
that's
It's
the day to day, yeah.
the day it opens up. Okay, what's going to cost the next 12 months? What's
Yeah.
going to need to be budgeted for keeping this place, the
Yeah.
doors open, for the hours we want it open? Okay, so that is all the target dates and who's going to take the lead on these things. We're doing it as a committee. We're not making decisions outside the committee, but we're bringing it all to here for the
Exactly.
committee to do. And so then, if I finish this off with you then, Amanda, then, and then we'll send that out to the whole group just to make sure everybody's cool with it.
Good. yes.
And then that can be presented to council on their next council meeting, which would be,
do you want that presented, or do you want to, so the next council meeting is January the 30th, or would you want to?
30th, January.
Or 13th.
13th.
sorry. Would you want to everyone go away and come back
Yeah, I
and
think we
have
should bring it back.
that discussion and then take it to council. I don't know.
Well, other
Can
than,
you say
if
that
we
again?
can
if we get a-
Sorry.
So the next council meeting is January the 13th. So in terms of whether or not you want to, each of you or everyone's working on something, whether you want to come back as a group and talk about that before you take anything to council, or whether you want to be on the 13th agenda. The next council meeting is February the 3rd.
Okay, and we meet on January the 16th.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's just gonna delay everything by a month on us.
But
Like,
we
this is
I'm
just the work
I'm
plan.
just telling you what,
Yeah.
like, just throwing it out there.
This is just strictly the work plan. This is saying,
Yeah.
here's our plan, this is how we're gonna do it. And they
So
have
do
to,
we
they
need
have to
a-
prove the work plan for us to proceed on it.
Okay.
So
I
do we
would
need
go ahead
then,
with it.
we need a motion then if on the work plan to take two? Is that
So
what we
then you'd
need
have
to
somebody
do?
come, you'd have someone come, or whether Paul comes and presents the work plan to council.
My only problem is with that.
Oh, yes.
I booked a trip a while ago, and I
And
always
you're
thought
not
the
here.
meetings were at the first and the third week. And I jumped the gun and I booked a trip and there's no backing out on it. And so, how could?
But it's not critical.
I mean,
But
you
it
don't
will
have
need-
to be present.
I mean-
Okay,
I mean, it
okay,
needs to
that-
be
that-
a,
Our whole
one or
committee can
two
show up.
members
That's
of the
right.
committee.
Everybody
Okay.
can
I think the
attend.
committee should show up.
You know,
Yeah, we should all be there, or as many as can make it.
Yeah.
And that's on the 13th,
January 13th.
January
yeah, January
13th.
13th.
But, I mean, we basically, in essence, like you said, like,
Yeah.
could we make it, can we make a motion to
Yeah.
approve this as discussed
Isn't
and
that what we
then?
would need to do, Amanda? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do committees and commissions?
Yeah, okay,
I
Nancy,
think
just
the
going to.
sooner we go, the better.
Yeah, okay, that-
I'll make a motion that we go
Okay,
present it to council on January 13th.
okay.
So can I just back us up for a sec here?
Mhm.
So Doug, are you fleshing out what we're doing today and that's going to be what we present to council?
Yes.
I'd suggest that since this has all been discussed kind of thing, that once Amanda and I get this, the final type version ready to go, that we would email it out to the committee and just say, hey, have a quick look at it while it's fresh in your mind. Any comments, reply all, so we hear what everybody says. And then if it's cool with everybody, then that carries on to the, that gets presented to the, so if there's any tweaks that need to take place, it's like, whoa, wait, that got missed, then that can get cleaned up, but in essence, we're approving what we've discussed here, and to present to council as the work plan. For the council to review the work plan and say yes, or they might say, hey, what about this? We want that added to the work plan, and that's okay, that's what they can do. And then, after the 13th, then we know, okay, it's approved, so when we meet on the 16th, we're hitting the ground running and going that same week.
Okay, were there any other questions? I'm going to have Amanda read the motion.
I think there's
Oh,
I
I'm
do have
sorry.
one more question, this is for you, Dwayne. Based on what you've witnessed today and what you're hearing today and the work we've done, do you think we're ready to present that to council on the 13th? Or would you advise us to have another look, or?
Well, I think, so in terms of the 13th, the committee has been meeting since August. I certainly see benefit to updating council in terms of where the committee's at in the
Yeah.
discussions.
Good.
We could put draft on it, is that okay?
I would put draft on it.
Draft.
Okay.
Yeah, because you may get comments or feedback from council that you may then want to go back and make some tweaks. I
Right.
don't know if you want to ask council at the meeting on the 13th to approve the work plan. My suggestion would be you present the draft to them, let them discuss it, let them give you feedback on it, and then we can always bring it back to the February 3rd for approval. But for, generally speaking, and that will be more of a formality in some respects, just in terms of council tends to like to receive something, review it, hear the presentation, ask questions, give feedback before they are comfortable enough to approve the final version.
I think it gives us an opportunity to find out what council thinks of what we've done.
Right.
And then we can carry on from there. If we need to make changes according to their recommendations, well, then at least we know we're gonna be on the right foot again.
Go ahead, Doug.
But unless there's anything that's really like bad that comes out of the 13th meeting of council, we meet on the 16th with our museum committee 3
Yeah.
days later. We would then be able to just carry on with the work plan, assuming that council would be.
Yeah, I mean, you'll hear what council's comments and feedback are, and if the general message, I'll call it, is we like what you're doing, keep going, then you're just do that basically. But I mean, if council like whoa, like you know, then you know.
Then we'll know we'll
You'll
get
have
feedback
you'll get some initial feedback from council on things.
Okay, go ahead, Lou.
I'm sorry, I need to have this underscored for me to understand what's
Yeah.
going on here. Are we saying on January the 13th, whatever our name has been attached to that was missing on the original draft, we are supposed to have that finished and ready?
No.
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just before Amanda reads this out, I'm just hoping that you might be able go maybe the next week, if that's possible, for the next meeting. I really don't want to miss it. I'm going to be away till the 18th of that. Right? I'm just wondering if.
So move it to 23rd then.
We got a council meeting that day, so we wouldn't be able to meet here. And again, I'm sort of tied up with that. It's budget time. But I'm just wondering, would like a Wednesday, would that work? I know they have a dam meeting that day, but if we had one where there's over an hour dip space in between, would that work? Or 20th or 21st? I'm sorry, if it's not gonna work, I'll just have to make arrangements with Dwayne here what I can do.
You talking January?
Yes.
What are we talking about?
Shouldn't we get the motion taken care of first?
Next meeting.
Oh,
Yeah. You had just
we
mentioned.
don't want it like the 16th.
He's gonna be away.
Oh, you don't like the 16th.
Okay, let's do the motion first, okay, Mandy.
Okay, draft motion here, that the North Huron Museum Committee hereby approve the draft work plan as discussed at the December 2019 museum meeting and present to council at the next regular council meeting on January 13th.
Do I have a mover?
Can you
I
read it
did.
one more
Oh, I'm
time?
sorry.
That the North Huron Museum Committee hereby approve the draft work plan as discussed at the December 2019 museum meeting and present to council at the next regular council meeting on January 13th, 2019 for consideration.
Do I have a mover?
I did.
Okay, you did, and seconder,
I'll second.
Bill? Anybody wants to make a comment?
Who is going to present it?
Doug,
Okay, well,
Well, Doug's been this
Our
spokesman.
committee
we're all
will-
coming.
Our committee will.
no, we'll all come, but somebody has to know that they're going to be the feet on the ground.
I'm
Okay,
with
Doug.
that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
all-
okay.
Person to answer.
All in favor?
There I can say,
Unanimous.
yes, I'm in favor.
Okay, yes.
Thank you.
What time's council at, 6?
Yeah, what time?
Yeah, 6 o'clock they
6
meet.
o'clock.
Bill, we have a Sallows meeting that day.
I know.
So, have we changed the
Yeah,
actual
I'm just
committee meeting?
asking, but if you can't do it, that's all, go ahead. I'm just asking, I'm away to the 18th, and I'd really like to hear what the council said to you. So I'd really like to be at the meeting, but I understand if it's not gonna work, it's fine. It only could be the 20, 21, or 22nd, or a bit earlier on the 23rd. It's gotta go a good hour earlier.
Not the 23rd.
Okay, I'm sorry, on the 22nd, I'm sorry. On the 22nd, it has to go by 1 o'clock. We'd have to be out of here by 3.
I can't do 22.
Okay, 22's out, okay.
So we're talking 21 and 23 now, are we?
21 and 20. Sorry, 20 and 21. If it's not gonna work, don't worry about it, but
Either
How
chair.
about the 20th?
You have your book with you?
I'm open both of them.
I'm
Oh.
open.
I'll see if I can make myself available.
On the 20th.
I will just have to double check
Day every
because
week.
I have a
Monday or
grandchild
Tuesday.
for 7
Yeah, I
days
can't.
somewhere around there.
Tuesdays I've got lectures.
Okay. So Monday,
But I
Okay,
could
Okay,
probably.
Monday would
somebody
be
else
the
to-
preferable.
I can juggle my schedule to make it work. yeah.
Monday? Monday for
I'm fine.
Brock, appreciate that.
2 o'clock?
Dixie, yes, it'd be at 2 o'clock on Monday. Dixie, would that work
Monday
out?
the 20th,
20th, yes.
2 o'clock? Yes.
Lou, does that work for you?
Monday is fine, Tuesday is
you.
not.
Yes. Bill?
I'm good.
I'm not sure.
Sure, yeah.
Okay,
Okay, appreciate that very much, peoples.
okay, 2 o'clock the 20th for the next meeting, sounds good for me.
Okay, the scheduling, number 10's looked after, so we're at number,
I guess next day.
oh,
Did we vote
next.
officially?
Next steps.
Yeah, we did the all in favor.
Well,
Yeah, just
I did, I counted, everybody had their hand up.
Yeah, you called the motion on the work
It
plan.
was all
Right.
in favor.
Yeah.
Go
All in favor?
forward from the,
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone had their hand up,
so
so.
whatever people have.
Okay, next steps then?
No, this is,
So I guess I'll
this
put
is
the
our
work plan
committee.
back
So
on
the
just for
20th or
discussion.
two?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it sounds like the January target
Yes.
dates. That everybody is going to do that.
Okay,
Well,
do you want this left here?
yeah.
Do you want this left here?
Yep, I can pick it up, no worries.
But you can take it, it's just not for circulation.
yeah.
Right.
Okay,
Just
all right.
concentration, yeah. People have one of it. Yeah.
What
And,
was actually beside that?
okay, can I go with the attorney now?
Oh,
Yeah,
this,
there's
yes.
no other.
No other next steps? We're going to have enough, it looks like, on the next. That looks it?
Okay,
I think so.
Yeah, so check this over when you get it to make sure I did get your name in the right pigeonhole, because,
Yes, because I didn't write them all down.
Mandy will make sure we get that all straightened out to us.
Because some
Okay,
of them were
so
not-
that the North Huron Museum Committee agrees that there being no further business before the committee, the next meeting being hereby adjourned at 4:20, and we're meeting, our next meeting is going to be on the 20th at 2 o'clock here in the chambers.
Right over.
That's what I want.
um,
I have, do I have a mover? Dave?
Sure.
All in favor?
Yes,
Hey,
yes.
you all in favor?
Bill,
Okay.
Bill wants me to go on.
Listen,
Could I have an informal question answered?
Okay,
In my historical work recently, I've come across